This episode of RSR is brought to you by Isotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Spectra 1964, and Grace Design. These are tools that I use every day in my studio, from the Spectra 1964, STX 600, 100, and 100D, and Native Instruments Complete 15, to Isotope Ozone and RX, and the central hub for my studio, the Grace Design M701 audio interface. Follow the sponsor links in the show notes. Grab my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com, and remember to like this video and subscribe on YouTube because it's a great way to help support this show. Now, get ready to rock.
I think the big part of it for me, where there ends up being a disconnect around vocals, is when somebody is like, I don't like my voice, so I want to learn how to sing differently. That's, I think, I shouldn't say wrong, but unhelpful approach. I think you should embrace the things about your voice that are unique, and in a lot of cases, maybe even the things that you don't like about your voice, you should embrace, while simultaneously working to try to get more out of your voice in terms of mainly control. I think control is the most important thing, more so than range, but usually through control, you're going to also gain some range through the practices that you would do to gain more control.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. The new Isotope RX12 is here, bringing powerful new AI tools to help you repair and improve your audio faster than ever. RX12 introduces scene rebalance for separating dialogue, music, and sound effects, plus Stems View for visually editing stems inside your session. You can clean up noisy recordings, remove bleed, rebalance mixes, and automatically trim silence from long audio files in seconds. Whether you're producing music, editing podcasts, or working in post-production, RX12 helps you fix the unfixable fast. Go to isotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Bleu McAuley, an award-winning songwriter, producer, and artist whose career spans major label releases, platinum pop records, indie favorites, and film TV scoring. Bleu first broke out on Sony Columbia and the multi-platinum Spider-Man soundtrack before pioneering early fan-funded albums, earning Kickstarter's first music project of the year. As writer-producer, he's contributed to gold and platinum releases for Selena Gomez, Jonas Brothers, Demi Lovato, Hanson, Michelle Branch, Big Freedia, and top K-pop acts like NCT Dream. His work also appears on The Good Place, Insecure, Shameless, and major ad campaigns, and scoring Disney's Legend of the Neverbeast. Bleu continues to develop emerging artists while expanding into scoring, including his Emmy-nominated work on HBO's The Golden Boy, and he's currently preparing several new releases, including his upcoming 7th studio album, Sgt. Pepper Grinder. A big thank you to Bill DeMain for making our introduction. Please welcome Bleu McAuley to Recording Studio Rockstars. Bleu, my man, are you ready to rock?
I'm ready. Thanks for having me. One thing I should mention is that I actually did not score The Legend of the Neverbeast.
You didn't? Oh, shoot.
I produced or co-wrote all of the songs for the film.
Right on. Okay. Sorry, I got that slightly wrong.
Yeah, so there's several songs in the movie, and I did also work on the score with the composer, Joel McNeely, who's a big, wonderful composer. But yeah, anyway, just want to clarify that. seemed worth mentioning.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you for doing that. I always appreciate that. And it's always nice to just get more into the details of everything anyway. So to that point, it's wonderful to have you on the show, man. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you for having me.
You know,
thanks to Bill DeMain, who I love. Great
thanks
guy.
to Bill DeMain. Bill's a sweetheart, man. I worked with him first in the studio doing Swan Dive records back at Alex the Great in the 90s. And my number one memory of working with Bill DeMain was the day he brought in a little Xeroxy booklet kind of thing. And he said, "Oh, check this out. It's something I'm working on. It's called the Sterling Huck Letters." Are you familiar with that? Do you know about Bill's work doing comedy stuff like that?
No, I don't.
Dude,
please.
You would love it. It's incredible.
Please tell me.
It's long before internet. It's long before we had email access to everything. And it was back when you could still write the PR department of different major organizations and companies and corporate brands. And you'd actually get a reply from somebody there. And so he would write in these spoof letters. It was kind of like prank calling corporations. He'd write in a letter and pretend to be some character who had like just an absolutely absurd question or like a totally absurd need for a product from them. And then they'd write these letters back and they were just hilariously funny.
As soon as we get off, I'm going to hit him up about that and have him send it to me because that sounds fantastic.
Ask him about writing Fruit of the Loom. That was one of the highlights.
Oh. I will.
All right, cool, man. So now, to your point, in your own words, give us a little bit of an introduction, like a brief story arc of who you are, like where did you come from, and how'd you get interested in music to this point that you're at now, where you've done all these incredible things, some of which I got right on the intro.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of very different things over the years, but all in service of music, I suppose. Yeah, I always wanted to be a songwriter, honestly. I started writing songs when I was maybe 4, 5, 6 years old, just humming little melodies to myself and writing little phrases and things like that. And I don't know, as I started to really get into records, as I got a little bit older, of course, at first, the records that my parents were really into, and then, moving into preteen years, choosing the things that I really liked. I strangely always recognized that there were sometimes other people who wrote these songs, or at least other people involved in writing these songs, other people involved in making these records. And that's something that I was interested in, from a very young age. And even though I definitely started my journey, as most do, wanting to express myself and create my own music, I think I always knew somewhere in the back of my head that I would also want to work with other people to help make their records.
You were destined to be another person?
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, I felt that way a little bit because I started out in music, playing in bands, and then when I learned about the recording, I thought, I want to be that fifth member of a band that gets to make the record,
Totally.
Which I think is sort of a similar idea.
I mean, it's exactly the same, and I think George Martin maybe being one of the first sort of like famous celebrity examples of this. You're like, well, oh, here's somebody who like seemingly gets to do all of the same creative oriented things without having to deal with really any of the BS of, like.
He was sort of like he never pulled an all-nighter during the White Album, I don't think, right? I don't even know if he showed up during the White Album, did he?
Good point. So yeah, I don't know. And it was a slow journey for me, but even while we were, touring before my major label debut came out, I was helping my keyboard player at the time try to make his first record. This was like early days. The first M-Box had just come out, and I was like, no, we're going to make a record like on the road.
Nice, man. By the way, what you need to recoin that as your first major label debut. Don't you think? You ought to own that one.
Fair enough. I did have a record or two, a record and a half or whatever before that. So that's kind of why I make that distinction. But, I have had a long artist journey that still continues to this day.
And where were you coming from? Where'd you grow up? What part of the world?
I grew up in a tiny little town in Virginia called Blacksburg, Virginia. I was actually born in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but moved to Virginia when I was, before I can remember. And we moved to Blacksburg when I was in elementary school, and stayed there all through my junior year of high school, and then moved to the greater DC area for my senior year of high school. And then I went to Berklee College of Music. I come from a family of academics, so there was never any question that I was going to go to college, but there was no question in my mind that I was going to be a musician. So I actually only applied to Berklee College of Music, and thankfully,
right on, man.
I got in and
so
went there.
When were you at Berklee?
Do I have to say?
Well, I just wonder if it was around the same time that I looked at it myself, because I come from Massachusetts. So I remember going in 91. That was for round 2 of college, and I was like, I looked at Berklee, and then ironically at that point, I think it was $10,000 a year, and I was like, oh, I can't afford that. Now you'd be like, it's only that much? Sounds great.
Seriously.
Cool, man. Well, I'm assuming you weren't a classmate with Pat Metheny when he was there. Maybe it was a little bit later.
It was.
I don't know.
No, it was later than that. Actually, Pat Metheny was the commencement speaker when I graduated. So, yeah,
that's awesome.
There you go.
And then what about Pat Pattison? Was he a teacher of yours back there?
Absolutely, and a huge influence. I was like very, very ready to soak up as much information as I could possibly get about the craft of songwriting. Still, like, incredibly fascinated with that on a real geek kind of technical level. And yeah, Pat was a huge inspiration to me when I was there at school, and we have stayed in touch afterwards as well. I haven't spoken to him in a few years now, but we stayed in touch for many, many, many years afterwards.
And then I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but was Connie Lyle somebody you might have been in school with there?
So she graduated, I think, just before me, or there might have been a year or two crossover there. But I met her on one of the Nashville trips. It might have been right before or right after her debut record came out, which I think that was a Lily White record, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I knew Connie when she was here, and then she and Joey Spompanato, so Rockstar's Joey is from NRBQ. They went up
very
to
familiar
Cape Cod area or something like that.
Oh,
but
no,
anyway,
they definitely ended up in Cape Cod. I still spend a lot of time in Massachusetts, and I'm good friends with this guy Chandler Travis, who you should have on at some point. He's good friends with
right on
Kami and Joe, and yes, they're all Cape people, which, as you may or may not know, is a whole thing.
I believe it. All right, cool. Well, so let's see. So you were doing the music thing and doing the band thing, and that took you out to where did you really do your band thing? So you senior year of high school in DC, were you coming from the punk scene at all?
No, God, no. Opposite, was very much not into that. Kind of am still really not into it at all.
Yeah.
Always been just a pop music lover. Across eras, kind of. I like the pop music from all eras. For the most part, there's some, there's a good 15 years there where I could probably do without it, but
But I mean, like Bill DeMain, for example, you're a big fan of the whole Brill building area and that kind of songwriting going back that far as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And before that, Tin Pan Alley, whatever, all that stuff. But yeah, no, anyway, definitely was not into the punk scene. But I had some bands when I was at Berklee, but that ended up morphing pretty shortly after I graduated into a band of all people that didn't go to Berklee. And a lot of that was actually very purposeful. I was looking for something that on the backing side felt less studied and less muso, I guess.
Right.
I
Yeah.
knew that I was going to have a lot of influence on that side, and I wanted the other side of it kind of to be, I don't know, just a little bit less Berklee.
Like foundational. Right.
For lack of a better term. So, and then that band went through some changes over the course of a few years, but eventually I got signed with that band. I don't know if you remember the WBCN Rock and Roll Rumble, but it was like a huge battle of the bands.
Yeah.
That got, a lot of national attention at that time. And so it was at that a lot of A&Rs came out and that kind of thing. And we actually got signed as a direct result, I think, of winning the WBCN Rock and Roll Rumble, which still exists, by the way, in a different form. But so yeah, it was
Boston. Boston was such a has such a thriving music history too. And I joke about that a lot on the podcast that I came from there and I didn't really have a clue until I had long since left and then started a podcast interviewing people who came out of the Boston scene and realizing I was like, oh shit, I was right in the hotbed of music at that time too.
Yeah. I think sometimes it just takes many years to like soak in all this information. And
yeah,
I mean, I was similar to you and I was just self-involved. Really is what it was, too self-involved to really pay enough close attention to all the things that were going on around me. But now it's cool to, kind of celebrate being a part of a scene and
right. So now your instrument that you were studying and what you were growing up with was it piano or was it guitar? What was your instrument?
I always played piano and guitar, and
like really studied. You were like taking lessons and really understanding all the harmonic theory and all that kind of stuff.
A little bit. I mean, I took piano lessons from the time I was pretty young and didn't like my original sort of classical oriented teacher who actually was smart enough to recommend another teacher who started to really give me, first of all, some foundations in harmony. As I kind of mentioned before, like I wanted to know how all the stuff was put together. I didn't care so much about whether I could play it well or not. I wanted to know what the puzzle pieces were that made me feel the way I felt about a particular thing. So that piano teacher, bring in songs and I'll teach you how to play them, but also show you what's going on musically. And it was that foundation that I think helped me kind of a little bit, to have a leg up by the time I got to Berklee. And I was always in choir. I was a choir person all the way from like elementary school. So,
so
you do have to learn.
You could read the music too.
Exactly. You do have to minimally know how to read and that kind of thing. I never took guitar. Well, maybe I did take a guitar lesson or like maybe I think I maybe took like 2 guitar lessons ever. But, just like any other self-taught person, I was trying to get other people to show me stuff. And I was always fascinated with alternate tunings, almost right from the very beginning. So, and that really took off during college. I was good friends with a guy named Ian Thornley who went on to have a band called Big Wreck. And he was a big alternate tuning guy and showed me some stuff at that time that really spoke to me. And I still primarily
like
play
alternate tunings for acoustic or for electric? Like, what does that mean? And like, was there a particular band or sound that kind of turned you on to that and got you excited about the sound of alternate tunings?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the band that really got me into it actually primarily was the Black Crowes. And because they had several songs on that debut record that I was obsessed with at the time, and I would get the tabs and they would show these alternate tunings. That's what opened up that world to me. But then I like kind of, again, because I was more into the like how things work, I was experimenting with my own tunings and all that kind of stuff. And in terms of acoustic or electric, that's not even a question. It's absolutely both. There's,
Right.
lots of examples of people who, play electric, all alternate tunings, or, I mean, I think weirdly a lot of people don't think of Keith Richards immediately, or maybe they do. I don't really know. But I mean, it's like the sound of the Rolling Stones is defined in many cases, I would say, by alternate tunings.
Awesome.
But yeah. So I learned to solo eventually and do all the things that needed to be done. And of course, Ian Thornley I don't know if you know that band, Big Wreck, but
not yet. I don't, but
he's like a guitar god kind of a guy. So he'll, I saw him soloing, doing amazing solos in any tuning you could possibly imagine. So I think that encouraged me to be like, oh, well, maybe I can do some little piece of that.
Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Right on, dude. So bring us forward to getting into studios, I guess you were practicing as an artist first, or living as an artist first, and then that sort of introduced you to the studio side of things and writing. I mean, how much of the studio even feels like your playground versus the writing room more as your playground?
I mean, I would say from the very beginning, I was incredibly interested in the recording process as much as the writing process. Although, I mean, obviously a lot of my early experience, as a lot of people's was with 4-track recorders. And even before I had a 4-track, I was trying to make recordings using 2 tape players where I would, play a cassette back on one side and record on the other side. But yeah, my high school bands were making 4-track albums, and selling them. And by the time I got to Berklee, I had my own 4-track, which I was making demos on. And that's how I was recording, the majority of the recorded material that I needed for my classes. So basically, like from day one on Berklee, I was like making my own sort of demo recordings in the dorms and even like getting choirs together and all that kind of stuff to record on 4-track. But I also was like, how can I get into the studios? Because, at least at that time, it was like, there are these like pro level studios right here at my college that supposedly are like some of, on equal with some of the best in the world, or at least that's how it was sold at that time. And I was just dying to get in there. So like I knew that I wasn't going to be an NP&E major, music production and engineering. So it was always like, what are the opportunities as a songwriter that I can apply for contests and things like that that will get me into the studios. So right from day one, that was like, I was trying to meet those people and say, hey, if you have a project, like and then I was trying to like worm my way in as a producer.
But it's smart because, as an engineer student, production engineering student at school, also a musician, but I mean, like, everybody was looking for somebody to record. Everybody needed musicians or a band to do their project because not everybody was bringing in their own band to do something. So it's smart to make those connections,
Yeah, and I would say, moving on from that, the most fundamental piece of the pie for me was meeting my mentor, best friend, best man at my wedding, who's unfortunately no longer with us now, the late, great Ducky Carlisle, a Grammy-winning engineer and mixer who was based in the Boston area for decades. We met fairly soon after I had this sort of final cemented band when I was trying to move forward with making my first, like, quote unquote real record. And we got introduced sort of through this third party guardian angel person and just immediately hit it off. And I was just so hungry for information about making records, and he was so open. And I think in a certain way excited to have somebody there who didn't want to just make my records, you know what I mean? But wanted to know what he was doing. So he was, like, and why? And like, what, like, how did you just make that sound? And like, how can we mess with it? And how do we change it? And like, what really is mixing? And, all those sorts of things. And he was so generous, but it was more than it. Like, I definitely started out mentor, mentee kind of a thing, but quickly morphed, I think, into like just a really close friendship. That's really where that whole part, began.
And that was your entry into the studios at school, or that was your entry into professional studios in Boston?
Professional studios in Boston, yeah.
So what were some of the studios that you really admired in Boston at your time then?
I mean, really just Ducky's studio. I mean, because that was the first, other than the Berklee studios, that was the first professional studio that I really spent time in. And I was just so in love with it. I never felt the need to explore further. Actually, we won studio time at Blue Jay, if you know, that plays legendary Greater Boston area
Carlisle.
studio. When we won that WBCN Rock and Roll Rumble, that was one of the prizes, was that you won some studio time there. And I remember we were excited and made some recordings there and had a good time, but also were like, just immediately wanted to go back to Ducky's, because we were like, well, that was good, but like, I think Ducky's better, and we're friends with him, and it's cheaper, and everything about it just seemed like better and the right thing to do.
Where was his studio? Was it closer to down to Boston? Because Blue Jay is out in Carlisle. It's out in the burbs near where I grew up in Concord. Of course, I didn't even know about it until I was long gone from there.
Sure. It was in what at the time was called Southie.
Right.
And which was a sort of legendary rough neighborhood. The name sort of course, the real name of that area is South Boston. And if you weren't
Marky Mark.
Yeah, if you weren't from there, you might call it South Boston. And now, of course, it's mostly gentrified, and they now call it the Seaport District.
Right.
But yeah, at the time, and especially where his studio was, it was very much Southie. It was like the end of a dead end like alley. It wasn't really an alley. It was kind of a street, but because it was a dead end street, it basically was an industrial street. It was a bunch of auto parts shops and, so on and so forth. But man,
which makes for good studios in a cityscape, warehouse spaces, industrial areas, get a lot of space for your buck if you catch it when nobody else wants to live there.
Which is exactly, what he did. And then eventually that studio actually burned down. And that's a whole other story. But then I was still, trying to make a lot of stuff with him. So we were floating around to some other studios in the area for many months, until I eventually convinced him to really convert his house into his studio, which he eventually did. And then he called that Ice Station Zebra. And then many, legendary records were made there, including, I think, he might have won one Grammy or been involved in one Grammy-winning record when there were a few Grammy-winning records that came out of Room 9 from Outer Space. That was the studio in Southie. But then...
What a great name.
Ice Station Zebra is a great name, too. He knew how to name a studio. He never got to have a third studio, but if he did, he was going to call it the Poop Deck, which I think would have been a great name. Maybe
especially for Boston and being on the seaport there. So now South Boston, that's where Mark Wahlberg's from, I think, right? Don't I remember that correctly? Like New Kids on the Block and Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
That's right.
Or am I mixing that up? That's what I thought.
No, that's from what I understand, that's right. Yeah. And so it would also be the older brother, Donnie Wahlberg. And then they have a younger brother who's like a chef or something too. Anyway, yeah, I believe the Wahlbergs are originally from Southie. That sounds right.
On, man. Okay, so you were into pop music, meaning like what kind of bands really were you digging at that time? And what does that mean for you? Because you're playing, and you're also referencing the Stones and alternate guitar tunings, but you're sort of shying away from punk rock. So I'm just sort of curious what kind of stuff really turned you on as you were starting your music journey.
Geez, that is a extremely hard to answer question. I think that my tastes have always been incredibly eclectic.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about like what was I into when I was growing up, or what was I into when I got to college? What was I into?
Yeah, maybe got to college.
I mean, when I got to college, that was obviously the moment when my musical horizons were expanding massively.
Yeah.
So that's when I got into a lot more muso stuff. Like, I didn't really get into Steely Dan until I was in college. That's when I really, even though like I knew Stevie Wonder and liked some Stevie Wonder, like beforehand, like college is when I started to do deep dives, into whole catalogs. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that were like very college specific. I definitely really got into Jeff Lynne and ELO starting in college. Started to do my like Beatles deep dives as well, meaning like not that I wasn't like I had listened to the Beatles with my parents when I was a kid, but never really was like, I'm going to sit down and listen to this whole record and try to learn how to play some of the songs, whatever, that kind of thing. And listen for the production, you know what I mean? Rather than like just like enjoying the song or whatever.
Yeah, who would have thought that the Beatles, those I Want to Hold Your Hand guys, were actually like super cool studio production and engineering,
Yeah, exactly. And, some of that was fueled by my classwork, certainly, but a lot of it was just hanging with other music geeks, and talking about records and listening to records.
What about current artists for you at the time? Were you sort of intrigued by what was happening on the indie scene at that time. I mean, I think we're talking about late '80s into the early '90s, right? So that era, I mean, the grunge scene was coming.
Yeah, it was mid '90s. So that was
mid
height.
'90s.
Yeah, so it was height. I mean, grunge broke my senior year of high school. But I was young going to college. I was only 17 when I started and 20 when I graduated. So
he was just 17. Sorry, I had to, man. I had to.
So I had a short and young college career, and I would say that was kind of the height of the explosion. I mean, a lot of people don't really remember, as big as grunge was, it came in a split second and burned really bright for like 3 years. And then immediately turned into caricature. Like pretty quickly, the sort of like post-grunge ripoff bands,
right,
like Candlebox and Bush, they start, like, a lot of, were the like progenitors to butt rock. Oh, like they came pretty fast. So yeah, I mean, my college years were
what
the
was
height
butt
of
rock
grunge.
to you at that time? Was that like Limp Bizkit when it showed up later, or was that too far into the future? You said when you were talking about butt rock.
Yeah, I mean, butt rock is an actual genre, by the way, that you can, like look up and search. But I think Nickelback is, I would say, is the most successful butt rock band. It's essentially that it's not grunge, it's not post grunge, right? Which was your Bushes and your Candlebox. Everybody essentially emulating that initial spark and wave of grunge. It was what came after post grunge.
Yeah.
Which was, a lot of people would think of it as corporate rock. But yeah, so it was like, your Stains and whatever, all those bands. So yeah, a lot of grunge I liked. I mean, I liked Nirvana and I liked Soundgarden. And the rest of it, I mean, to be honest, I could take or leave. But Super Unknown came out while I was in college. And I will say that's still an absolutely seminal record for me. Even songwriting wise, I feel like I still go back to that record as a source of songwriting inspiration, even now.
Yeah, you bust out the spoons.
I was very inspired by the chances that they took on that record.
Yeah. Native Instruments now brings you Complete 26 with powerful instruments, synthesizers, and creative tools to help you make music faster and stay inspired. The legendary Absynth 6 is back with evolving textures and experimental sounds, while Contact 8 gives you the tools for chords, phrases, and arrangement right inside your workflow. With Massive X Guitar Rig 7 Pro, session guitarist instruments, and premium tools from Isotope and Brainworks, Complete 26 gives you everything you need to create in any genre. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Well, when I was out at NAMM some years ago, I saw Michael Beinhorn did a whole presentation on the making of Black Hole Sun. And it was really incredible to see that. And he talked about, coming in with the demo, and it was already had that sound, and then just recording it. It was just a lot of fun. He was able to break down all the parts. But I'm with him on that one. That record, both Nirvana and Super Unknown, totally stood out to me. And then there, I don't know if there was a name for it, but then along came the male baritone version of grunge. And the stuff that came along with Pearl Jam and that kind of stuff, it just sort of shifted a little bit.
Yeah, what was that Christian band, Creed?
Right.
And yeah, all that stuff. I mean, if you were, at least in Boston, playing in bands at that time, you didn't like any of those kind of bands because I don't know.
It was opposite coast. It was war. It was, you had to have a little bit of warring of the coasts, right? You always do.
I think it was more like we felt that it was so obvious that it was like a facsimile of something else that was inspired that it felt inauthentic in even whether it was or not.
And you're seeing in Boston, that was still when like the Pixies were big at the Rathskeller and that kind of time, or was that more?
No, this was definitely after all. Yeah, this was definitely after all of that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I've got you stuck in a decade now as we're trying to tell your story.
It's fun. I like reminiscing about that stuff.
It's fun. It's fun to talk about it all. I think we're similar time frame. Because I was in school down here in Tennessee, 91 to 95. So those records were coming out. I was driving across the Vanderbilt campus listening to their college radio in my piece of shit Ford Escort that I spray painted silver.
Wow.
And that's when, over the radio, they broke this new song by a new band called Nirvana. And I just stopped. I remember not driving through the light as it turned green, because I was just like mesmerized by the sound of this new record. And I was like,
wow.
All right. This both feels awesome to hear on the radio and already familiar to me at the same time,
Nirvana was a weird one because that broke when I was still in high school. But a lot of people don't remember the record was around for almost a whole year before Smells Like Teen Spirit actually broke as a radio single. And a friend of mine had copied it for me, had made like a cassette copy. The whole record was on one side of the tape, and then what was on the other side of the tape? I bet I still have it. Anyway, and so I was already mesmerized with this record that just said Nirvana. That's all it said. I didn't even know if it was the name of the record or the name of the band or if they had any other records or anything. But that was definitely, and at the time it was like, there almost wasn't even a name for it. It was just like, this was like, well, in Blacksburg, Virginia, I don't know, we would have called it underground music or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do feel like I remember the term underground in the late 80s too, and then it became indie, and then now I don't even know what indie means now. I press indie on a Spotify and I hear it and I'm like, wait, what is that? I don't even know.
It sounds like pop.
Yeah, it sounds like pop. Yeah, exactly.
It's a genre. It's like a genre now, basically.
So let's jump forward a bit. So you of course your real interest has been in pop. Would you say still, or because I'd say your playlist is very pop focused. It's really accessible music. It's accessible songs with a lot of great singing on it too.
My interests are vast. I would say I have happily, made some pop records. And obviously now, if you like, as a whole, are mostly just two genres now that are taking a lot of outside songs, and that's country and K-pop. And a lot of people have asked me, like, why did you decide to get into K-pop? Like, do you love K-pop? Have you loved K-pop for a long time? All those kinds of things. And I do like some K-pop. I like that they will jump on some trends and take some risks in a lot of cases before other genres will, and that kind of thing. But a lot of the reason why I've had a bunch of K-pop cuts over the last several years is because that's who's looking for songs.
Right. The door's open. Yeah. Well, and that's it. That's a unique thing about being a professional in songwriting, particularly is, any of us could write a song for ourselves, but if you want to write songs that other people will cut or sing or use, then you have to, then it 100% involves open doors so that there's an opportunity for that kind of interaction, right?
Yeah, and that's not to say that, that there aren't like some opportunities in every genre, but I would say in a lot of cases they're much narrower, those opportunities. Like if I really want to write rock music but don't want to be an artist, contemporary rock radio, but don't want to be an artist, there are just less opportunities there. They're not non-existent, but just overall it's a smaller pool, so.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's like only so many opportunities for a Robert Hunter in the world to write with the Grateful Dead, right?
There you go.
Wasn't that him? Yeah, he was the one who was always writing a lot of the lyrics for the Dead songs.
I am not a big Dead fan.
That's all right. But I just meant that as a reference of like, the idea of like that's sort of an obscure co-write opportunity.
Right.
That's what really meant.
There's a guy that I wrote with.
I didn't mean for you to riff on Jerry Garcia all of a sudden.
Let's get into it, man. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, there's a guy who I wrote with years ago, a wonderful writer named Dave Bassett, who is like one of the go-to rock writers. But I'm just saying, there's only a few of those guys who all the dudes are comfortable with. He's been in the rooms enough times to know, how to navigate that world and so on and so forth. But I mean, I would say I there are interesting things about writing K-pop records, and that's really fun. But I like working with artists, most, I would say, and now a lot of what that means is working with and developing indie artists. And one of my biggest successes over the last many years now is a band called Air Traffic Controller. Had a bunch of big kind of virally records with them, but really and. Now there's an artist, Lola Blanc, that I've worked with a lot, who's, had some big records, totally independent records. But I find that those kind of opportunities allow me more of an opportunity to kind of stretch and try to do things that are really more outside the box or float my creative boat, that kind of thing. And those are almost always situations, where I'm writing and producing. I mean, so is almost all the K-pop stuff I'm writing and producing as well. But but yeah, so I don't know. It's a long-winded answer, but I wanted to. It's not like I'm just writing K-pop records or just pitching for the. I am doing a lot of things, and I think if you listen to the indie stuff that I have worked on, it's a far cry from the K-pop.
Yeah,
world.
Totally. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about what it means. Like, what is a process of co-writing? Let's say you get a call or maybe describe, what that first call was like with Air Traffic Controller, and then, what are some of the next steps that happen for you in that co-writing process?
Well, I will say with Air Traffic Controller, I actually didn't start co-writing until we were pretty far into the process. That was a situation where a singer-songwriter approached me looking to make his first professional records. And the guy's name is Dave Monroe, and I just thought, this is a guy, this is an incredible diamond in the rough talent. And so from the very beginning, I was excited to try to help him make bigger and bigger records. And at the beginning, it was more about working with his buddies, as a band to try to pull stuff out of them and figure out how
so familiar
we could make interesting records in a lot of ways kind of around the guys that he was working with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as we moved on and I was able to help make some connections with some other, more professional musicians. And as I was kind of getting more trust in the process and able to do more stuff myself, I think it just progressed, more and more as we went along. And that's when Dave started to feel more comfortable with me being a part of the writing process because, that was something rightfully so that he was very precious about. He has an incredibly unique, distinct voice. You can tell that it's his songwriting, not just, his singing. And, as you know, that's an unbelievably unusual thing to find. But so, sometimes I would encounter a song and I'd be like, this is like the best verse and pre-chorus that I've heard all year, but there's no chorus.
Right.
Like things like that. And he's like, oh, but this part is the chorus. And I'm like, but it doesn't sound like a chorus. You got to put a chorus in there, man. It'd be that kind of thing. And then then that would be the part that we would work on. But then that ended up morphing all the way into us working on stuff from scratch. And as he got comfortable with the process, he was able to be his full, amazing songwriter self in that scenario. And that's where it really got thrilling. It was always great making records with them, but that's when I think it really, the creative juices were in full effect. But it's different with every artist. Blanc, pretty much all of the lyrics, or, the vast majority of the lyrics and the vast majority of the melody all has to come from her side. Because, come on, buddy, you want to come up? I got my cat here with me.
Nice.
Did you want to? You can come up, buddy. Come on.
I'll bring my dog into the studio, and then they can go out.
Oh, here we go. Come on, buddy. He's because I kind of hemmed myself in here, so he's like, but I don't want to fall. My cat is very uncoordinated. He's like one of the most uncoordinated cats I've ever seen in my life.
That's awesome.
It's a very non-cat-like trait. So yeah, he gets worried if he doesn't feel like he has a clear path. Oh, now he's messing with the microphone. Nope, don't do it. Don't do it, buddy. Okay.
If you record music, podcasts, video, or dialogue, the brand new iZotope RX12 is one of the most powerful audio repair tools you can add to your studio. RX12 now features AI-powered scene rebalance, letting you separate dialogue, music, and sound effects for incredible control and post-production. The new Stems view makes stem editing faster and more visual than ever, while upgraded music rebalance and dialogue isolate deliver cleaner separations with improved machine learning. RX12 also adds trim silence, helping podcasters and editors instantly remove dead space and speed up long-form editing workflows. Plus, rebuilt de-bleed tools and real-time processing improvements make cleaning up noisy recordings easier than ever. From restoring damaged audio to fixing podcast interviews, guitar tracks, vocal tracks, and film dialogue, RX12 is the industry standard toolkit trusted by producers, podcasters, post-production engineers, and music makers worldwide. Go to iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Bleu McAuley, joining us from somewhere in California. Bleu, are you ready to jam?
I'm ready. It's funny, the choice of words, because I'm a notorious hater of jamming.
Right.
Yeah, I just as a I don't know, very, like, some would say, I think I would say detail-oriented. Other people might say OCD. Songwriter, producer, the whole idea of jamming, I think, goes against my religion.
Well, you'd probably be more like, wait, what are the exact chords we're going to play and in what order and for how many bars?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm like just a free moment when somebody could solo and play whatever they want? I don't think so. No.
You're like, hold on, don't start telling me that the wrong notes are just as good as the right notes. I'm not going there. Okay, so One of the artists you have worked with is KT Tunstall, and that was one of the top tracks in your playlist, 1,000 Years. Talk a little bit about that. And on the music that you shared with us, that's you singing as well. Yeah, there's a lot of you singing in there?
It depends on which playlist you're talking about, because I sent an Apple playlist that had a lot more of my productions.
It's Not Over. That was one of the tracks on there.
So that's moved way up in. I think what you have there is like just a generic artist profile Spotify playlist. So those tracks will actually move around over time based on plays.
Right.
But It's Not Over Till It's Over and Done had a really big sync recently. So that's moved way up in the algorithm lately.
So first question, well, two questions. One is, I think I'm hearing your voice on a lot of those as the artist, and you're a great fucking singer. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Wow, I didn't know we needed to cuss about it, but I appreciate that.
Sure, why not? Why not?
Now I feel like it's real.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I thank you. That's really, really kind, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I've got some thoughts about that, and then also on that particular track, It's Not Over, there's an accompanying video, and I believe that was on your website as well. But it's I think you might have. I couldn't tell if you're integrating. Here, I'll see if I can show this one I was thinking of here. Hang tight. I'll get there. Lots of buttons for me to push over here.
Isn't that what we do for a living? That's what my wife thinks I do for a living. Push buttons and turn knobs.
There you go. This one right here.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all footage from the show that it was featured in, the Sandman.
Okay, groovy. Oh, that's the Sandman footage. I see.
Yeah. So that was actually created by the studio, which was very, very kind of them to make that. But yeah, they actually put together that lyric video, which is a shortened version of the track that's more just easier to digest. That just has all the best, pieces of footage or whatever that they want.
Well, it's great. It's a hell of a music video to have out there too. So that was cool.
Yeah, a good friend of mine is the showrunner for that show. Huge music fan, really has an encyclopedic knowledge of music. His name is Alan Heinberg. For people who don't know, he's a big writer and now showrunner in the DC universe. But he put in a bunch of music from his friends throughout this final season of the Sandman, and it's really cool. But yeah, it was so nice of them to like put together a lyric video so that people who found out about the song from the show could come and discover the song and see it actually directly tied back to the show. That was super nice. And it's the whole end credits of that particular episode. But if you've seen the show, the way that they do the end credits is like really elevated. They have their own, animations specific, to that episode and just really cool graphics and stuff like that. So it's cool. That is almost like its own video. And the song lyrics very specifically relate to what happened in the episode and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's a neat time.
So is that something you can talk about, that process of composing a song for sync like that? Because we didn't even get into it, but one of the things you've done is also create a course for Berklee all about successful sync music placement, right? And writing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I will just say in that particular case that's an older song of mine that's been out for many, many years. And because in this particular case, I happen to be friends with the showrunner, writer, co-writer of the show, he was looking for songs. And again, because he has this sort of photographic memory almost, like for songs and the people that participated in them and that kind of thing. He was in his mind as he was working on the show, I think, looking for songs that he knew would fit. So I didn't write it for the show.
Okay.
And it just so happens, and in fact, it even goes a little deeper than that. He knew that there were certain lyrical phrases from the song that were gonna work perfectly with the theme of this episode. So it's a very purposeful edit of the song so that it like lyrically matches exactly what's happening, during the action.
Now,
of that.
do you sometimes have needs to write a song so that it fits the episode in reverse? And do you have a process for approaching things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I talk about that, in my course. That's a specific subset, I think, of sync writing is, writing specifically to brief or writing specifically like a song for an episode, for instance, for like a Disney animated show or any, animated show. And those are all, slightly different kinds of writing, as you might imagine. What I tend to find is that most people who are taking the course are interested in writing their own artist material as they would write it. In a lot of cases, I think people don't even realize that you should be writing with sync in mind. I think most people just are like, well, I made all this awesome music and I want you to put it in film and TV. And one of the main things that I sort of demystify in the course is that if you really want to take a big swing at sync, that's not going to get you very far, basically. It's about approaching all these different avenues and also, for lack of a better term, like approaching the market. Like, when you're writing for the country market, right? You can't just say, oh, I wrote this song and I think it's an awesome song, so please have your biggest country artist cut it. Right? It's much more specific than that. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there are similar things associated with sync writing. If you want to get your song synced, you need to write songs that are good for sync.
Right.
And there are different subsets of that, just like there are different types of country, and each artist has their own voice and, all that kind of thing. But
now, do you write songs? You talked about writing a song to a brief. That would mean a brief would be a description of the TV episode or the film or the scene or something like that with some sort of thematic elements that the song needs to reflect or evoke. But would you also sometimes, and is that correct? And then alternately,
yes.
would you sometimes write music where you're just writing for different kind of emotional genres because there is no film yet?
So I call that, and in my course, I kind of had to come up with a name for that because there really isn't one, but I call it artist-oriented sync. And what that means is where you're creating songs as an artist yourself or under an artist name, and that may be a collaboration or a specific project that sounds a certain way. And you're doing that with the idea of pitching for sync. And of course, that is a lot of how that area of the business works. It's not a huge chunk of that business is people that are just looking for songs that already exist, right? They're not necessarily looking for you to write something custom for their thing. And in a lot of cases, they'll do both now. I've found like they'll put a brief out there and say, give us something custom or something that, falls within these general parameters. So I'm sorry, I can get really in the weeds.
No, this is all great. This is all
did that
helpful.
That answer your question? I hope so.
100%. Yeah. Cause for me, it's, I'm able to ask sort of beginnerish questions around this topic, but I think that for the audience too, it'll be fascinating for the same reason. So to that point, if somebody said, I want to start practicing writing sync music, and I've got a home studio, what would be your advice as far as how to begin that process? Would it be, next weekend, go pick an emotion and just start writing some instrumental music around that? Would it be to write lyrics? How do you begin to think about something like that?
What I find through the people filtering through this course is that people don't even know what it is. So I think that is the first place to start, is listening, right? And it has to be way broader than a single placement. So there's a certain thing that I like to call a hero placement, right? That's that scene in a beautifully directed movie, right? Where Magnolia is like the perfect example of this, right? Where all of the dialogue stops and a song starts playing to this beautiful imagery, right? So that is not what you can go for and hope to have any success in this business. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but like those type of opportunities are such a thin little sliver of the pie, and they're going for big established artists or like new artists that are about to bubble up, but that they're specifically choosing. Again, I'm not saying don't try to write those songs, but I'm just saying that if that's your success strategy, you're bound to fail. And I think that's a lot of how people look at this. Like, I'll use the Garden State soundtrack. You know, that was like this huge like indie soundtrack that like broke all these bands, right? If your whole goal is to like get a song on whatever the next Garden State soundtrack is, you're gonna fail. So
right.
How do
you essentially
start?
already have to be the popular indie band and just happen to be in the right place at the right time at that point.
Exactly. So if you want to write music for sync, listen to sync. Be like, okay, well, what is the area where I think I might succeed in? And I can just tell you right off the bat, like the higher dollar amounts tend to be in commercials, right? Not all of them. There's also network TV, but again, there's less network TV. There's less premium cable shows than there are commercials, you know? And
yeah.
Some of this is changing. Some of this landscape certainly is changing, but let's just pick commercials as a good example, right? Listen to commercials. Like, go on YouTube, spend all day just consuming, or whatever, however many hours you want to spend, 4 hours, just consuming the music that is used in commercials. Find out what that music is, right? See if you can find the links, hopefully not on Spotify, and to that music, and then start to figure out what you think it is about those pieces of music that made them work for those commercials, and if there's anything different about them. I do a whole thing on this at the beginning of my course, and they're pretty quickly start to realize that there are these hallmarks of songwriting, and it can shift. It shifts with the trends, just like everything else. But in a lot of cases, certain kinds of advertising for sure, but even within cable television and network television, things trend in and out. But within those trends, in a lot of cases, they actually can be quite different than like saying, just look at the pop charts. You know what I mean? There are entire genres that really only exist inside of advertising sync. The most obvious example are these hip hop rock hybrid like songs that they use for the NFL and the NBA and all that kind of stuff. You don't hear those songs on the radio or on the Spotify charts. That literally like an entire genre of music that exists specifically to pitch to a certain kind of advertising. And that's not to say that it's not inspired by other genres, but within itself, it's very specific. And that's like kind of just a very obvious example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, well, It's fascinating, and it's good, helpful advice to just, understand, like, well, where do we go begin to listen? And the fact that you can pretty much find a clip of just about anything on YouTube is a good way to do that for sure. I guess it'd be an awful lot of watching TV if you're just waiting for them to show up as you're in the middle of a TV program. But
well, it's
also,
a lot easier.
What about studying libraries? What about studying libraries like Epidemic Sound or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, most of my experience is with Universal Production Music on the library side. But I do want to just clarify that, like, a lot of this is not library music. And in fact, I would say I stumbled over my words there. The vast majority of this is not the vast majority, but a lot of it, let's say, is actually not production music. It's not what they used to call library music.
Right.
They're
so just for clarity's sake, library music would be music that can be licensed to be reused by anybody. Music that you're creating that a brief goes out for and then it's purchased, that would be music that is going to get used one time on the placement, typically. Is that how you differentiate library music from what you're talking about?
With library music, there's one entity that owns all of the rights to the songs in their catalog. So they own all of the publishing rights and all of the master rights. That's essentially what defines what they now call a production music library, which generally professionals in that field don't refer to it as library music really anymore. They try to refer to it as production music, which is a little bit confusing of a term, but there it is. So the deals that are made within that can be vast, but I would say in the vast majority of cases, the music made for those libraries is commissioned specifically by the rights holding entity. Not all of it usually, but usually some large chunk of it is commissioned, again, specifically to cater to the needs of the people that use their particular catalog.
Yeah. Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. And I imagine the reason why I know about Epidemic Sound as an example of a library is because I've made YouTube videos. So I'm sure that that marketplace is people who are making their own content who need music that's allowed to be used as background and in videos and stuff like that.
Right.
Or, if you want to use background music in a podcast, for example. But I mean, the way some of that licensing works too is you get permission, you get your YouTube channel approved by the library, in my experience. So therefore, it doesn't get flagged, otherwise, because if you used it and it wasn't approved, then YouTube, you get a notice and all of a sudden your video's not working anymore, that kind of thing.
So that's all something that the catalog itself, the rights holders are dealing with on the back end. Yeah. So all of the original creators of that music are not dealing with any of that. And a lot of cases, they're just getting paid a one-time fee up front to, essentially sell the rights to that music, to that catalog. Sometimes you may get your back end, your performance rights, royalties from ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and the like. and in some cases not, or you may only get a percentage of that or whatever. It depends on the library. But yeah, that's what you're talking about specifically. But just to circle back to the sync world again, like with a huge company like Universal, you may have entities like massive entities like ESPN and the like coming for custom stuff from that library or asking them to pitch things from the library that they may then ask for a lot of changes on or whatever, those sorts of things. Generally, what I'm talking about is music that, although I get into the whole production music side of things in the course, a lot of what I'm talking about in sync is necessarily related to those production music libraries. It's people either sending out briefs and looking for custom work back, or sending out briefs and looking for non-custom work back, usually with like budgets approved in advance and that sort of thing. But I get
Right
into
on.
a lot of stuff in the course. There's stuff about work for hire, the production music stuff. It's all kind of in there because I feel like you have to piece a lot of those different things together these days in order to make a whole career in music. And that's a lot of what my career has been about, is doing things in all these different fields and avenues to sort of generate a whole living.
Totally. So to that point too, as you're producing or creating this stuff, tell us about your studio. Do you have a studio setup that you typically work from to generate content or to generate music for sync licensing or to co-write from?
So I've had many studios over the years and worked at many other studios. Right now, I actually am primarily working out of my home, but in a space that I've like specifically designed for creating. And then I have a studio that I share with a close collaborator of mine named Jesse McGinty, and that's out in North Hollywood. I live in Santa Monica. And that's where I have more of my like just stuff that I basically can't keep at my house because I don't have
Right.
enough room. So like more outboard gear and instruments, my piano is there and a bunch of other synths and things like that are all at that space. And then I go there sometimes when I'm working with artists, or sometimes they'll come over to my house. And obviously, if I'm working with multiple people, I'm probably always going to do that over at the studio. And a lot of that is also stuff that I want to collaborate with Jesse on anyway, because he's a wonderful musician in his own right. So yeah, but I'm comfortable creating in almost any space. And I definitely come from the school of thought that it's about the creativity more so than it is, and creating an environment or embracing the creativity of whatever environment you happen to be in. I guess I'm much more of it's the wizard, not the wand school
Right.
of
Well, that
thought.
goes back to you with your box, taking it on the road with the band, thinking like, yeah, this is where we're going to make the record on the bus here.
Exactly. So yeah, I have always kind of been that person, but that's not to say that I don't love working with great gear and vintage gear and analog gear of all sorts, and have some of that as well. But it definitely isn't like my number one thought or focus. And in terms of how I like my spaces to be set up and for my sessions to go, it's about speed, really, is what it all comes down to. It's about capturing things as quickly as possible. So a lot of the advice that I give people when they're setting up their home studios is that everything should, like every new piece of equipment should be towards that end goal of streamlining your process. So, for instance, if you like a lot of analog synths, and maybe you're thinking of like upgrading to another analog synth, but you're not using all of your synths because you don't have a separate interface or mixer that they're all going into so that you can just open up one set of channels and be ready to go on any of them, I would invest in whatever that piece of gear is rather than the new synth. If you have a lot of like guitars that you never use, why are you not using them? Are you not using them because they're not accessible? Or are you not using them because you don't like to play them? If you don't like to play them...
Are you picking on me personally right now? Are you picking on me, Blue?
Am I?
No, it's funny. You mentioned the analog synths, and sure enough, I started collecting semi-modulars, and that is exactly what happened until I was like, wait, I'm going to take this Mackie mixer I've got, hook it up over here, run them all into that, make sure they're all MIDI connected, and now anytime I want to play one, you just play the MIDI note and pull up the fader on one of those synths, and it's already making sounds, and then it's like, to your point, all of a sudden I'm able to use them on sessions now, because otherwise they just sit there as a good idea for one day.
Yeah, I mean, I hate it when somebody like comes into your space, whatever it happens to be, and sees something interesting and is like, what is that? And that's always a point of inspiration, right? And like they're excited. They're already excited before they've touched the piece of gear. And almost doesn't matter what sound that thing is going to make. Like the excitement has already begun. And that's what I'm trying to chase and help to flow, right? But if they're looking at that thing and you're like, oh, hold on, give me a half an hour while I set that thing up. At the end of that, even honestly, like 10 minutes, at the end of 10 minutes, that spark is gone. And in a lot of cases. And so yeah, I feel like my early big mentors who were Ducky Carlisle, as I mentioned before, and Uber producer John Fields, who produced my major label debut as well as the follow-up.
Sweet, man. I had John was an early guest on the show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's great.
We're still friends and keep in touch to this day. And
Funky
he was
Town.
also, he was instrumental in encouraging me to move to Los Angeles and pursue more professional songwriting and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I love John Fields to death. He's an amazing talent, but he was a lot like Ducky in that he was open to tolerating my hunger for knowledge. But both of those guys were very much about capturing inspiration as quickly as possible. And their setups were very different, but the way they operated, both of them was geared towards that goal. Yeah. And I have always appreciated that and as best as possible tried to maintain that. It just drives me nuts when it's like, I don't want to like explore a new drum sound. Like, I'm just not that person. I want to have the drums set up and mic'd up. And when I don't like something about it, change that one thing and leave it that way, thus theoretically slowly improving that setup over time. I have interacted with a lot of other people and studio partners that just don't operate that way. For me, and that's okay too, but for me, that drives me nuts. If like I come to a session and you have to take more than really like less than 5 minutes to set anything up, it's going to drive me crazy. Because I'm like, to me, it's just not necessary.
Because the ideas they're dissipating faster than 5 minutes. Inspiration comes and goes quickly. And I mean, to your point, it's like you don't want to explore new drum sounds. You want to explore new drum parts.
Exactly. You got it. And also, it's like the recording quality. Matt, we all love when things are recorded well. There's no question about that. But I would also say that all of us love songs that we know are not recorded well. And it doesn't diminish our love of those. That is not, it just isn't the key factor. Even with every single person's own experience with music, it is not the key factor. And I contend that that key factor is about another that comes from inspiration, spark, God, if you will, whatever. It comes from some other place, and trying to somehow funnel or capture that is just more important than getting a better sound. Now, of course, Steely Dan, who I love to frickin' death, somehow managed to subvert all of that, and all of that goes totally out the window. And I could name other recordings too. So,
I did an interview with Bill Schnee, and one way to think about that is long before Steely Dan even walked in the door to do that session, he had already set up a super dialed in studio where he had already chased the sound, the purest sound for everything, so that when they could sit down and do it. And I feel like as studio owners, that's the prerogative. Is that the right word? Yeah, the prerogative is on us. Or no, the onus is on us.
There you go.
I don't want your prerogative on me. The onus is on.
I'll suck your onus all day, though.
Is on us to make sure we're ready before we step into the, tuning our antennas to the inspiration, because you want to catch that lightning when it comes.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of these cases, it depends on whether I'm the engineer or not. And then if I'm not, hopefully I have a good relationship with that person. And everybody works differently. A lot of people like that space that's created by the setting up of things, and they appreciate the comfort in knowing that there's been a mic shootout, and this is the best possible mic for their voice. So I don't want to assume that this is a monolith here. I'm just talking about myself very specifically.
Well, I mean, and to your point, I refer to that as building the machine. So when I do sessions with a band, or have done sessions, particularly tracking, where there's a lot of stuff to set up. And when I started out, I came from the zero the console out, start from a blank slate kind of approach. And I used to zero my studio out and coil the cables up and hang them on the walls after every session, And then I finally started getting tired of doing that. I started thinking, well, couldn't we just leave the headphones hooked up at least? And actually, honestly, I did that interview with John Fields, and his advice on getting so much done was you have to be ready so that the drums are already mic'd up and they're already ready to go. And that stuck with me. And so as soon as I could, I was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to leave the house kit set up. It's actually a pain in the ass when a drummer wants to bring in their own drum kit now, because I'm like, now I got to do all the work of moving my drums out of the way. But it is still faster than, starting from scratch. But that ability to just jump around from instrument to instrument, it's so fun to make music fast. And as a artist myself, as a musician, a music maker myself, I'm often at the instrument when we're making music fast. And then the only missing piece is, geez, it would sure be nice to have somebody out listening to the fucking speakers while we do this and telling us if this sounds good right now. Because a missed opportunity to adjust something, like you said, if you don't like it in that moment, then maybe adjust something a little bit. But
exactly. Yeah. Ducky always had a good piece of advice, which was basically always start with the easiest thing, because a shocking percentage of the time, the easiest thing is good enough.
Right.
And then, and if it doesn't, if it's not the thing, then you didn't spend much time on it. You know what I mean? And then you can decide to kind of move on. But I think so many people at the beginning of their journey want to start with the most complicated thing, actually, to sort of, stretch their knowledge or skill or whatever and that kind of thing.
Understandably so. I mean, you come out of recording school or wherever you're starting out, and you're so proud of yourself for being able to set up a microphone stand and run a mic cable and uncoil it and recoil it and all these things. Totally. Richard Dodd, similarly, when he was on the show, his response to what's the best microphone to use, and the answer is always the one that's already set up.
Yeah.
Use that microphone.
Ducky was very big on that as well. Yeah. He's like, it's if you want to record something, stick a microphone in front of it and see if it sounds good.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. And then if it doesn't, then do whatever else. You know what I mean?
Well,
and obviously over time you learn and building out a studio is about building out those things, right? For instance, this maybe is a bad analogy, but if you only have like one cloud lifter for your ribbon mics for one particular thing, as you expand, but you want to use that on guitars and you want to use that on some ribbon microphones for the piano. I'm just using these as examples. Then eventually you're going to want to get another cloud lifter so that you don't have to move the cloud lifter around every time. You know what I mean? It's like, right? It's like, that's kind of a lot of what it's about. I think about building a studio out is about building out those conveniences, right? Having the thing that you want on the thing that you want ready to go, not having to move that one thing over and set it up in different instances,
Native Instruments now brings you Complete 26, loaded with creative tools for songwriting, production, mixing, and sound design. The big news is the return of the legendary Absynth 6, with evolving textures, cinematic soundscapes, and experimental sounds designed to spark new ideas fast. Contact 8 continues to be the center of the complete ecosystem, with built-in tools for chords, phrases, grooves, and arrangement to help keep you in the creative flow. With Massive X Guitar Rig 7 Pro, session guitarist instruments, Play Series sounds, and premium tools from Isotope and Brainworks, including Ozone 12 Elements, Complete 26 gives you everything that you need to produce in any genre. Plus, Native Instruments continues expanding NKS integration with complete control keyboards and machine hardware. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Well, and also to your point, one of the struggles sometimes in a studio is, I know I've got one. Where is it? Where is it in the damn studio right now? And I think part of the answer to that is, if it was hooked up already, it wouldn't matter where it is. It'd already be hooked up. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You wouldn't even have to look for the stuff.
Let me go to my file cabinet and look under G's for whatever to find where I put that mic. It's like, yeah, exactly.
For grommet. Clearly, we were looking for the grommet in that case. But to your point, I think a takeaway for me is knowing that in my studio, I've got a lot of stuff that's hooked up, that's ready to go. But then I've also got fun things that are sort of on display a little bit. But I almost feel like a takeaway from your advice is, dude, if they're fun things, get rid of them. Don't even have them in the studio, because somebody's going to see it and get inspired. And if you can't use it right then it's actually detrimental to the session. How do you feel about that? I mean, or maybe I just got to keep buying ways to hook everything up until it's all hooked up, and then you keep all the fun stuff. But like the old reel-to-reel that's sitting on a shelf, stuff like that, it's like, maybe that does need to be plugged in.
Definitely. I mean, I'm a big believer that you shouldn't have any gear that's not easy to use, basically. And again, I know there's lots of people that operate that way, and that's totally fine, and that works well for some people. But for me, yeah, I want to, if it's there, I want to be able to use it. And the weirder the thing, I mean, people who come into your studio, they're always going to go for whatever the weird novelty thing is going to be the first thing they're going to see and want to be like, oh, we use that? Certainly when it comes to reel-to-reel. Now, there's a whole obviously that's a big setup and expense and pain in the butt. But obviously there is a way that you can use the reel-to-reel and still record directly from that into your DAW, in real time. Uh, if you get into that, or you think that people that come to your studio would be interested in that, I absolutely think you should invest in that. I think more and more too, it's like, especially with AI really taking over in such a big way. And I until 5 minutes before we started this, I was at an AI seminar, by the way, just to throw that out there. So I am pretty familiar with what the very cutting edge of this is and how much it has already been adopted in our industry. But I think, all that being said, that somebody who is coming into your studio, more and more they're going to be coming in looking for something that's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And I think that a reel-to-reel machine is a big part of that. An old friend of mine just made a record almost entirely on 4-track and 8-track cassette.
I love it.
Made his whole new record that way. And not talking about reel-to-reel. I'm talking about cassette, 4-track, and 8 tracks. They made cassette 8 tracks where, that 1/4 inch was split 4 ways on 2 sides. And
I know we made our second record. Yeah, Warm Milk on the Porch was made entirely on a cassette 8-track.
Wow, nice. Great title, by the way.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Love that title. But anyway, the point is, one of the reasons why I'm so enamored with this record is because of all the, in my mind, beautiful inconsistencies and kind of crust and grunge and whatever you want to call it that's associated with this like obsolete media. I'm a partner in a plugin company that I helped develop. I'm wearing the t-shirt here if you're watching the video. And the whole point of this plugin is to celebrate all of that stuff. And again, I think that as AI starts to get used more and more, which, I mean, it already has infiltrated the charts, and they're now signing AI artists and blah, blah, blah. That the things that are not AI almost have to be more obviously not AI, if that makes any sense. That's one of the things that I love so much about this guy. I'll just mention is the guy's name is Steve Eggers. He's in a Canadian band that's been around for many years called The Nines. And the record is called, I'm going to get the title wrong. I should probably look it up. But anyway, it's this Echoes of Future Past. I think that's right.
Nice.
Anyway, it's the most recent record from The Nines is the one that I'm talking about here. It is just such a beautiful example.
Echoes of Past Future. Echoes of Past Future.
What did I say? Future Past? I think I said
close enough.
Past.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I feel like we're in grammar class all of a sudden.
But yeah,
past perfect future tense.
There's something about the talent, right? That shines through in that too. It's like this raw, unfiltered talent that you have to have in order to be able to make something on a technology that's that limited and that old. Or you have to have a certain kind of talent, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Which he has.
Well, and I think there's, I think about this a lot, the AI question and music and what's coming. And I mean, I'm grateful for the ways that AI opens up, the world of writing emails and, having to do things in text that's a pain in the ass for me to do. I'm grateful that it can, I could give it a list of ingredients and then have it tell me afterwards, how many calories that meal was or something like that. And I'm grateful that it could potentially be, well, I'm grateful that I could I'm grateful that I could write a song when I was visiting Costa Rica in Spanish, not being a Spanish speaker, and have it tell me what other words in Spanish might rhyme with that word. And then I think about, I think I could see a way to say a, metaphor with that line, and then have it correct my sentence for me afterwards. So I was able to write and record a song in Spanish. But I know that people are also really nervous about, AI sort of killing the music spirit and the creative spirit. It's not for me. So I think about it in the creator's perspective. Like, if it can help me, if there's ways that it can help me create more, then that's great. I don't want it to do the creating for me. I want it to help me create, or just, as what was the line that who was the famous quote? I want it to do my laundry, not, do my art for me. I forgot who said that.
Well, it's really difficult, I think, to predict where this is going to head. But I feel very confident that there are going to be some big winners and a lot of really big losers.
You mean as far as the companies that are giving us products, or the people that are attempting to use the stuff?
I would say both, but what I was referring to specifically are basically, when it comes down to it, musicians. Production music, as we were talking about before, just to loop back, what a lot of people call library music, I think is going to be decimated. If I had to make one like real world prediction, I think that is going to just be completely decimated, if not eliminated. I think a lot of sync eventually as an industry, is going to be decimated by this. Whether or not they can actually do it successfully or not, when any executive can go on to an account and type in a prompt and get something that they think sounds good, right? Whether or not we consider it to be on a professional level, that automatically devalues what we do, period.
Right. Right.
And so at the core of it, that is the problem, right? Is the automatic nature of it automatically devalues it. So again, if I'm an executive and I can go onto one of these services and type in a prompt and get something that I think sounds like good music that I can use for my thing, I may still be hiring a musician, but my idea of how much I should be paying them has gone way down. And I think that is something that we should all be concerned about, not to stick our head in the sands, to know that this is what is happening. I also think that the speed at which that could happen, again, like I have found uses for AI that have sped up my process. I found lots of other uses for AI that seem to be about the same amount of time as if I were creating from scratch, although maybe with different results, so on and so forth.
But I've had it slow me down too.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's about practice as well. And you can't take that out of the equation. But all that being said, the theoretical speed, again, the speed that a non-musician can generate things, again, devalues. They're going to expect more for less. And I think a common mantra, and I've already experienced this with executives in the industry, saying, well, can't you just AI that? So now any change that they're asking for, right, that they're expecting is very quick and easy to do. And some of those changes are very quick and easy to do, and some of them aren't. But all of that is besides the point. That perceived speed from their point of view devalues, right? Well, why would I pay you what I was paying you before for a day's work that I perceive can be done in 5 or 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think that's
so.
Not
I think about.
I soapboxed a little bit there. I'm sorry.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. I think it's helpful. It's helpful, and I think we need to be aware of this stuff, especially different listeners who are thinking about different paths forward. I'm 58 years old. I might be thinking about a path forward in the future where I just think, in a retirement age, I want to be able to just make music because I enjoy making music. That's very different from somebody who's, starting a family or about to start a family age, who's thinking, I want to have a functioning career in making music, which is exactly where I was, decades ago. And so it's important for us to know these things. And I think about like you and I, as we started out in music and worked our way through all this stuff, we experienced a decline in music. I mean, even when I did the interview with Teresa Knox at the church studio, Leon Russell's studio in Oklahoma, she was talking about how the industry has sort of been, the music and creative industry has been a little bit stuck. Certain elements have been stuck as business models where, the rate for a day in the studio may not have changed in 20 years. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So it's important for us to be aware of things that are coming in a way that can allow us to make smart choices. But I think it's also important to know that despite us, Bleu, you and I going through an industry that was, the old way was kind of evaporating and changing, and along was coming the MP3 and streaming and things like that. So some things were dying, but then other things were taking off. There still are opportunities. You just have to figure out where the opportunity is moving forward and really embrace it. And I would suggest that people still have to be willing to take to embrace risk and fear in going in directions of new opportunities too. I'm curious about your thoughts on all that as the songwriter and this, understanding sync and understanding what's coming with AI and all that.
I think it's kind of hard to predict, and I think a lot of it depends on what camp you happen to be in, or the types of people that you're surrounding yourself with and all that kind of stuff. One thing I can say is that I definitely know some circles in Los Angeles that are heavily embracing AI, and almost no output doesn't have some level of AI associated with it. So, and obviously it's being embraced as well on the industry side in a lot of ways, in all kinds of different ways. But I think to your question specifically, I don't know. I suspect that it is harder to make a living as a songwriter, even as a songwriter producer, if you were starting out now than when you were starting out. I suspect that I don't actually have any facts or figures to back that up, but it seems to me like that seems to be the case. I don't know. What does it seem like that?
I would, well, I didn't follow a songwriter path. So for me, I've grown to understand what professional songwriting is through my journey of pursuing engineering and production and working with bands and artists. And I've grown to really appreciate it. It's one of the reasons why I love having Bill DeMain on the podcast. It's, why I'm thrilled to be introduced to you and be able to talk about it as well. But I've seen that. So as far as the changing landscape, I would say, yeah. I mean, I'm learning that through studying it more and more. I live in Nashville, and I know a lot of people who are doing the co-writing stuff, and I'm seeing people who are seeing success with it, and I think it is also just changed and evolved. So I don't know if I can answer that expertly, but I feel like
I can't
I'm
either.
seeing
It's like
both work.
It's anecdotal.
Yeah. And then as far as the Well, I was going to say, as far as the independent recording studio producer, music creator, mixer, you have to wear all the hats all at once, and you live in middle America. You don't even live in a music hub. My guess is that opportunities will still exist because there will always be people who want to keep making music everywhere. But what those opportunities look like will probably shift.
Yeah,
And,
I mean,
the
there's not,
studio
there's,
it's really shrunk down to like, the laptop and the speakers and the microphone and plug your
and
guitar into the laptop.
I think
Please
people
go,
have,
go ahead.
no, I just want to kind of expand upon and confirm what you're saying. I think the other side, in addition to all those things, is that the people that are consuming that product of the recording studio are getting more and more used to that being the norm as well.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And not necessarily expecting this big, kind of what we think of as a traditional old school studio. So, I mean, you could speak to this more specifically, but I do think that that sort of model of like, every major and even minor city having their own recording, you know, sort of professional recording studio space with a live room and a control room and a booth and, multiple mics and amps and drums and guitars hanging on the wall. Am I painting a picture here? I think
Yeah.
that, you know what I'm talking about? No, I feel like we're, that's not going to exist in every place because the economics just don't hold up for that. But it's not just about the economics. I think also that's not what people are looking for. Those aren't the records that people are trying to make as much. You know what I mean? And we're just as likely, I think, as a young listener, not we, our young listeners are just as likely to want to connect with somebody who is just performing live in on their phone, as much as they are something that was, made in some big studio. In a lot of ways, I think they connect to it more. And so if that's the medium that we're working in, then there just is less need for the large scale studio.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Yeah, totally. Now, to your point, in terms of the going against the trend kind of thinking, you mentioned, you were talking about somebody recording on a 4-track and on an 8-track. And I was really struck by one of my interns in the studio. This is 5 years ago, maybe something like that, 6 years ago. I think it was about 5. And he was really into the 4-track music making. He just really liked that. And he was playing me bands like, I just forgot the name of it, Missive, it'll come back to me here. But I got turned on to some of the newer artists that were doing stuff that reminded me of like Ween making a record or something like that, with 4 tracks. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I sort of encouraged him at that point. I was like, I think you could, if I was young and I was starting into that studio world and I wanted to do something that was unique and different and try and attract people, the newer artists that really appreciated that, I might even consider doing a studio that was nothing but cassettes, just cassette 4 tracks and 8 tracks and 2 tracks and everything. That was the only medium that was used in the studio. Maybe, yeah, you still have to have a computer in the mix, but maybe you don't, maybe the computer isn't until it goes to mastering. But like sort of setting yourself apart can be a smart way to set a career path, whether you're doing studio and production. And I imagine, I'd be curious your thoughts on whether that can apply to songwriting too. Approaching songwriting as a totally going against the genre.
I think that's difficult if you're if you're hoping to just be a songwriter, right?
Yeah.
And not a performer of any sort. I think at the highest levels that professional songwriting rewards people who are able to work with a high degree of creativity within the confines of the genres.
Right.
And a lot of
Makes
that is
sense.
also just about personality, to be honest, and that kind of thing. Some mix of talent and personality, which of course, whatever, every creative industry is some version of that. But I agree with you. And that's why I would say, like, if we're talking about your studio in particular, I think to have a reel to reel and yet not be featuring it seems like a mistake to me. I'm not here in like to give you advice by any means, but I feel like more and more people that are going to the studio, they're like, well, if I'm going to this studio, I'm going for this other thing,
Right.
like this other experience. Like I can make my song already at home now with 0 instruments, right? I don't have to have even a keyboard or anything anymore. I can generate, I don't know if you know or not, but Suno a few weeks ago introduced the first generative, they call it a generative audio workstation instead of a DAW. But Suno, introduced the first, totally online DAW, generative DAW. So at this point, I mean, and of course,
So you
there's
can
plenty
make
of
your individual tracks and things like that. Does it have the, sing your idea into it and then it creates from there, that kind of stuff? I see I get my fair share of YouTube videos on, what's the latest in AI music stuff. Some of it's fascinating, some of it just makes me want to change the YouTube video as fast as possible.
Sure.
But I mean, the idea of that was a question I had around it earlier, was like, what if it's remarkable what it can do sometimes, but then it's like, yeah, but what if I don't like that bass part? What do you do? So it sounds like maybe that's getting addressed. And to your point of things moving faster than you think they're going to move, it's going to get addressed. Like it's going to change so fast.
Yeah. And I think, again, I do think that there's going to be this like kind of splitting where we're going to look at a lot of things that are going to use a whole lot of AI, and not just in music, in things that we can't possibly imagine. And then simultaneously, these things that are almost insistent to a fault on not just not being AI, but being things that are very obviously not AI, could not have been generated. And that's the thing that I think is going to be interesting that we can't predict, is what it's almost like I can predict the AI side of the equation more than I can predict the non-AI side of of that equation.
I guess there'll be a lot more jamming.
You know what? You are almost certainly correct about that. And I don't know how I feel about that. Might have to get used to some jamming. Good old 12-bar blues. Let's go. Pentatonic.
All right. This is a hypothetical question I got to ask you. This is one I love to ask all the guests on the show. We get to take the Wayback Studio machine. You go back in time and you find young Bleu. And
by the way, there's a huge artist called Young Bleu.
Was there really? Okay, well then maybe don't go find Young Bleu.
Yeah, who I've actually had a trademark dispute with, like very specifically.
Wow.
So, yeah. Because
did you guys play Rock'em Sock'em Robots?
No, he actually tried to change his name to Bleu, Bleu. And so like I had to hire a trademark lawyer and do all this stuff. So anyway, sorry, that was very triggering to hear Young
that's all right.
Bleu.
That's all right. Well, I understand. But you go back and find yourself when you were younger. There you go. And you say, listen, Bleu, the original Bleu, the Bleu. Yeah. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself, or a rock star of songwriting. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
Is such a great question. I really kind of appreciate in a lot of ways how my journey I'm going to go just this is probably a horrible thing to say, but I think that I would like to have done more investing outside of music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My Bitcoin, baby.
No, I mean, I do wish that I had, like, when I was at Berklee, it was a voice major, and I wish that I had a little bit more technical proficiency. Like, if I had it all to do over again, I don't think that I would have switched my major because I got so much out of the songwriting major, and I learned so much about production shortly after college through some wonderful mentors. But I wish that I was a better and more technical and more musical piano player and had like even a deeper understanding. I wish that I had gone a little bit deeper on that side of things. And I definitely would have either switched my primary instrument to guitar or piano rather than voice. Not that I certainly get around on both of those things, but I wish
Well, I
that I
feel like
got
you
around.
sang. I mean, one of my questions was, about hitting high notes. I mean, you sing a lot of high notes, I think. Yeah.
I do. I guess I do, or at least I did.
Yeah. And you
I
just sort of did
certainly
the soul, the growly soul voice too. And I was, as somebody who's trying to do more singing myself, I'm like, that's pretty cool, man.
Well, thank you.
Pretty
I
cool to be able to.
appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know that my vocal education at Berklee had much influence on my voice. I ended up struggling with my voice at a certain point earlier in my career and ended up seeking out a lot of vocal coaching through that process. And I found that to be much more educational, was really the more like coaching side of it more than like sort of vocal education, if that makes any sense. Although the coaching is all education as well, I think, or at
It's
least
also,
that's
it's a
how.
lot of practice, right? It's also just a lot of exercise and practice.
Exactly.
To that point, would you suggest that those of us who are listening who think my voice just is what it is, that we need to think bigger than that. We need to understand that I can sing higher notes than I can now if I choose to by learning how to do it and exercising it and working on it. It's a muscle that needs to be worked on, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically been proven, I think, at this point that you can learn to have a larger range through coaching, what I would call coaching. I
Yeah.
think the big part of it for me, where there ends up being a disconnect around vocals, is when somebody is like, I don't like my voice, so I want to learn how to sing differently. That's, I think, I shouldn't say wrong, but unhelpful approach. I think you should embrace the things about your voice that are unique. And in a lot of cases, maybe even the things that you don't like about your voice, you should embrace while simultaneously working to try to get more out of your voice in terms of mainly control. I think control is the most important thing, more so than range, but usually
Mhm.
through control, you're going to also gain some range through the practices that you would do to gain more control. But I think that when the process of singing a song needs to feel effortless. So if at any point you're thinking about technique while you're performing a song, I think that's where we get into a situation where people are not able to connect with it in the way that they need to be.
Right.
So
And that's probably the place where we need to keep rehearsing until we don't have to think about it anymore?
I think more than rehearsing, it's about, this is what I like to how I like to think about it, right? You need to like stretch and prepare and work out like physically, but to me, that should all be like disconnected from the performing of a song, right? If you're like, all those things should be done on their own, right? But don't connect those to your process of emoting.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
Once those things get introduced into the process of emoting, then there's like a barrier between what you're trying to convey. And, you know, that's a producer's, but like when I'm producing a vocalist in the studio, trying to get my best vocal out of them, I'm not generally talking about technical things, right? I'm talking about emotional things, right?
Yeah.
I might be talking about technical things on my end, like let's just get that one word or something like that, or let's, you know, just get this one phrase, or maybe you should be singing it the whole way through, or whatever it happens to be based on, you know, my experience interacting with that person. But generally, I'm not like, you need to sing more from your diaphragm, or like, I personally find that anytime somebody gets into that technical vocal kind of talk during a session, that's when you get diminishing returns on the the emotional connection of the performance. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. That's good advice, man. We got a lot of good tips from you, man. I really appreciate having you on the show. It's great to meet you. Can you let the rock stars know how can they connect with you? We'll make sure to include the Apple playlist in the show notes. So rock stars, please go check out Blue's fabulous singing and songwriting there. But where else would you like them to follow you, you know, keep up with what you're doing and connect in any way?
Well, I did launch a Patreon recently, and I am at the higher levels. I am going to be getting into some basics of more of what the subject of this podcast is on, more kind of geeky, deeper songwriting and production stuff. But the main goal of the Patreon is to hopefully create a sustainable outlet for me to create more of my own music, as that is
groovy.
That's really my goal. So, and you can sign up for free. And there's still lots of stuff that we offer on the free levels. And then there are some very affordable, you know, levels above that. So you can just go to patreon.com/BLEU, Blue spelled the French way, to sign up for that. And I think this is probably going to be coming out early 2026. And I am
a little later than that, but yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So probably my new record's going to be out at this point as well, Sgt. Pepper Grinder. So please go check that title, out. Man. Thanks.
As in Pepper Grinder.
You got it.
I love it. Love it.
So yeah.
Well, you know, when they bring the Pepper Grinder, that's always like, it's like the what's the word I'm looking for? The creme de la resistance or something. I don't even know. Did I just mix up like a whole bunch of expressions? But that's like
but I like it. I liked it. I'd like to try a creme de la resistance. You know,
right. They bring you a dish, but it's not special until they bring that's why the Pepper Grinder is enormous. Is there any reason for a Pepper Grinder to be that big other than to just point out that it's the special moment?
Well, I will tell you, I actually really get into food too. And I have one of those giant pepper grinders, and there is a reason for it, and we don't need to get into it. But beyond the fact that it's a big, beautiful phallus, there is actually a good reason why it's that big. But
did you consider? The original title for the record, Big Beautiful Phallus, just didn't make the cut, and so
no, that's my next record.
Sgt. Pepper Grinder was awesome, dude. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for hanging with us on the show, man. Very nice to meet you. Rock stars, thank you for listening. If you're listening and you're not watching, come on over to the video channel, YouTube, or in the future, in the AI future, who knows what video channel it's going to be, but we'll still be there. We'll probably be in 3D at that point, and we'll probably also be able to talk back to you and answer questions directly. But make sure that you subscribe to the channel so you get more of these interviews from us. They will accompany you on all your long drives and your workouts and your walks and your house cleanings or wherever you listen. Some people actually listen while they're setting up for a session, but not after this podcast, because you're gonna be like, dude, if you're setting up for a session, you should just not tear down after this one.
Man, this is fun. We had a long chat here, and
I know we did. We went longer than I expected.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. So thank you.
A lot of good stuff covered.
Yeah, and thank you for having this, kind of forum as well for your listeners out there. I think it's really cool. I mean, I will tell you one thing. I wish that there had been something like this when I was coming up. I'll answer your previous question that way. I wish that there had, been this, nothing like this existed where you could just hear people, talk about their experience. You had to like either contact people directly or know somebody or, there were very few
read about
interviews.
it in a magazine. Tape Op was kind of the first print that came along where I was like, oh, wow, you're really getting down into the, the nitty gritty of what goes on, what it's really like. But
so yeah, I want to say thank you, for this. I think that this is really
my
cool
pleasure
to have something like this out there for people.
And rock stars, if you enjoyed it, hit the like button too. That way, that more people will get to enjoy this. And then here's a question for you, Blue. What question would you like to ask the rock stars that they could answer in the comments of this video?
I am curious their experience with AI. At this moment, this particular inflection point, I have a lot of questions for young and people who are early in their journey, what their thoughts are on AI, both generally. I wonder, like, how much are they using it? How much are they running away from it or running towards it? And so, yeah, I really would be genuinely interested to know what people's experience with it and also their attitude and beliefs about it. I'm trying to get a bead on your listeners, and I really do mean that, but this very specific particular subset of people who
you can refer to them as the rock stars. You can just refer to them by name.
But I mean, I don't mean like just this podcast, but I'm talking about like people who are trying to get into recording and producing.
Yeah.
And I am curious, like, where they stand on all this and their thoughts about it. So I open it up and please let me know how to link and come back, because I would actually really like to be a part of that conversation.
I will indeed. Speaking of which, after 2.5 hours of sitting in our chairs, I think we're going to be thrilled to stand. So, Blue, thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you around the studio, dude.
Same. Thank you.
All right,
have a great week.
Cheers. You too, man.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our fantastic sponsors who make this episode possible: iZotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Spectra 1964, Grace Design, and Picker. Check out the Spectra 1964 website for factory direct budget-saving prices on the STX 600, 100, 100D, and BBDI DirectBox. Check out my studio profile on the Picker app on iPhone or Android, and remember to take advantage of our special coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase at iZotope.com or nativeinstruments.com. And don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes below. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because it's a great way to help support this show. And I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Daria Tupesis. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.